Hey guys, Marry Me. This is Anastasia on Fire, and today is my week 7 video for the YouTube Pagan Challenge. This week's subject is all about sacred texts and mythologies. Again, as is usual with these types of videos, these are just personal thoughts, personal experiences. By no means am I saying everyone has to agree with me or that what I say is going to be right for anyone else other than me. It's just what I found in my practice on my path as of right now. Also, I do have notes. I know I struggle looking at the camera all the time anyway, just because my eyes tend to wander and all that jazz. But you are going to see me kind of looking down a lot, so I hope that doesn't irk anyone too terribly bad. But this is a subject I can easily get carried away with and go off on tangents. So I wrote kind of an outline of the major points I want to hit, what I want to get across, to try to keep me on task as much as possible. So please forgive me if my eye contact isn't stellar, and then we should be golden. So a general definition for me of what a sacred text is any text that helps create a base or a foundation for one's spiritual path. So obviously, like the Bible, the Quran, things like that, that give a basis on what your spiritual path is built upon. You could say what a religion is based off of, but I resonate more with spiritual path just because that includes any religion out there plus any journey that people could be taking, at the risk of sounding pretty hippy-dippy, but that's just kind of what I've got. There are texts or sources that can be used for spiritual inspiration, yet for me are not sacred texts. For me, a lot of my crafting, a lot of my workings, to kind of delve into other archetypes can be inspired by various things, comic books, novels, pop culture, things like that. While those sources can bring me spiritual inspiration, I would not count them as a spiritual text because they are not, the Hulk can inspire me to help me with some anger management or make an incense for better communication so that the anger doesn't well up. But I'm not going to use the Hulk as a basis for my spiritual path. That character may be an archetype that I can work with within my spiritual path, but it's not a base for me. I just kind of want to put that out there because I do work, if you've watched other videos of mine, I do have my kind of nerdy inspiration bits, and in no way am I just didn't want people thinking, okay, so this is the chick that uses comic books for her spiritual guidance. No, I love comic books. I'm a huge nerd. Video games as well, movies, what have you, but they're not a basis for my spiritual path. I just can connect with them in a spiritual way at times. That sounds crazy, but hopefully you know what I mean. So, what are some sacred texts that I work with within my my practice? And I just realized I'm looking at the wrong notes. I'm so sorry. I've gone over this outline a couple of times. There we go. Okay, so what are some personal sacred texts that I work with? The Norse sagas are huge for me. Celtic mythologies and legends, Greek myths and legends, and also some fairy tales, especially Slavic. Why these types of stories speak to me on the spiritual level, and what is it about them that I can use them kind of as a jumping point for my practice? These pieces of literature or texts or what have you They use a lot of imagery, a lot of metaphors, and I like that because they keep things in the abstract world almost. So they're not accessible, but they are. Like it's not black and white. It's working with a lot of grays. So you're able to take these texts, take these stories, and work within them and decipher them. You study them, you research them, and you find a whole new meaning within them. And the cool thing about it is the meaning I find in them may not be the meaning anyone else will find in them. It's going to be something totally different from person to person, and I really dig that about it. And I think it deepens our appreciation of them. It deepens the meaning that they have. It deepens our path because we have these amazing stories and we found these amazing lessons within these amazing stories, and these lessons take on this whole new life because it's a discovery we made. It's something personal for us. It's not something, my sister could read, could read about hell, and she's not going to get a lot of the things that I get from it, and things that she gets from it, I wouldn't get from it. It's really cool, how that works. And I think it also speaks to, or it helps us find the truth within ourselves. Sticking with the hell analogy, as my matron goddess, there's a lot written about hell that I have not found true. There are stories where she really is cold and cut off and doesn't care. And well, yes, she can be cold. Well, yes, she can be distant. And true, she can be very harsh. She is a very nurturing energy. She is very loving, very much about acceptance, very much about understanding without getting too emotionally involved. And I know that sounds horrible, but a lot of times I find once I get emotionally invested in something, all of a sudden I'm in the throes of every freaking emotion that can come to my head. Whereas keeping your distance, you can still care, you can still worry, you can still be present emotionally, but every emotion you have doesn't need to come forth. And that's kind of what I mean by that when I'm dealing with her. But if you read these stories, she's this abomination, this monster that was hurled into Helheim, and she takes the souls of the dead and tortures them and forces them to build this ship that her father Loki can captain during Ragnarok. And well, yes, she does judge the dead. She's and she certainly does send those that are dishonorable and oath breakers and things of that ilk. She sends them to be tortured. She's also a protector of children. She's also a protector of mothers who die in childbirth. She is the caregiver to all those that die a mundane death, so to speak. And that was something that I learned while reading these stories. The Vikings were terrified of her. They were horrified of her, and I never really got it. And then all of a sudden it hit me. It's like, if you're a Viking, you're a warrior. You want to die in battle. The whole point is for you to be slain while doing your duty and being honorable, and having the Valkyrie come and take you to Valhalla or Folkveld or one of those halls for the heroes. And if you end up in Helheim, you ended up with, you know, all the old, oh, that's a horrible way of saying it, all the seniors who passed away because of old age and, you know, accidents and disease and people who were slain in the mundane life, you know, not in battle, but murdered and such. And that's not where a warrior wanted to be. So of course they were terrified of her. Of course they were scared of her, because that meant they didn't live to their potential. And that is something you learn by having sacred texts that you work with. You gain this closer understanding of the deities that you work with, because you're forced to look at what others have found of them or written of them and take what they say, but find your own truth within it. And through that research, through that study, through that seeking, you gain a deeper appreciation, a stronger relationship, and even more knowledge. I mean, even if it was a situation where you think a certain deity is calling to you, so you do all this research and then you go, nope, not resonating, it's not them, you still have all that knowledge. And I think that's so crucial in any spiritual path. So yeah, sorry, I kind of went off on a tangent there, but it actually leads me really well into my next point, which is these types of sacred texts can open up a window to the past. We have our connection with our ancestors through these writings. We can see what kind of values they had. We can see what kind of life they lived. You know, for Celtic mythologies, one of them is on Rihanna, and her child is taken from her, and her servants, who are supposed to be watching the child and weren't doing their job, decide they're going to frame her for killing the child, and they go through this huge ordeal to hide the fact that they actually, you know, screwed up and weren't paying attention, and the child was spirited away, and they frame her for the child's murder. And she, of course, goes to trial, and she is, you know, maintains her innocence, but she's found guilty, and she goes through this horrible punishment. And the whole time, she maintains her innocence, but she doesn't get angry. She doesn't get mad, or at least the times I've read the story, and maybe there are sources where she does. But from my knowledge, which may not be much, because I've only read a couple of different occurrences of this legend, but it's what stuck with me. But she takes her punishment, and the whole time she says, I didn't do this, it's not me. But she does it, and she's noble about it. She's takes responsibility in a way that most of us don't take responsibility when we are to blame for something. And then, of course, later on, her child, I believe it was her son, comes back to her, you know, years later. But so all of a sudden it's found, oh no, she didn't kill her son. And everything is forgiven, and everything's right as rain again. But the whole time, she's this amazing goddess. She's actually queen, I believe, in this story. And everyone turns against her. Everyone. People frame her. And she takes it. And she deals with it. And she moves on. And she knows, I like to think at least, she knows deep down her truth will be known. And I think that's an amazing insight into the people of that time and the people of that culture. That's a huge value that they would have, is to do what's right, not easy. It's easy if someone says, oh, you did this, Yep, I did. Even if the punishment is death, I'm sorry, I would hate to be strapped to a yoke and cart people around as though I was a horse, which I believe was her punishment. For years and years, and food thrown at me, and people spit on me, and this and that. I would much rather be dead than deal with that every day in, day out, especially knowing that my child is gone. As a mom, huge issues. It just, the fact that someone who has that much power could take so much punishment for something they know they didn't do. And not only something they know they didn't do, but something as intimate and personal as your child being taken from you and you being blamed for its murder. There is a strength in that she was able to endure. There is a nobility that I think is extremely lacking in this day and age. And that was a value that the Celtic people must have had to bestow it upon one of their goddesses, one of their great goddesses. To say, to give her that quality in their tales, that's an amazing thing. And I think that speaks volumes. And it gives us an idea, it clues us into what was valued by them. What attributes were needed, were a positive, were seen. And it even can, because I believe in a lot of Norse writing especially, and I'm sure in Celtic as well, they even have, documentation that deal with common people, everyday folk, and you have a sight into the history then. It totally connects you to your ancestors because it's showing you what they went through, what they dealt with. And that's insanely cool to me. And I think that's a huge help in anyone's path. Sorry, just regaining my composure and remembering where I'm supposed to go next. Because I know I could go various places, but I'm trying to stay on point. It also can give us a better understanding of tools that we use, especially divination tools. That's kind of where I was going with it. The runes, the Ogham, tarot, all of those things are a thing in historical writings, in sacred documents. Runes especially, that really spoke to me because the runes are so ancient. The runes are magic incarnate in ways. And the fact that Odin, who is the Allfather in Norse mythology, the fact that he had to be taught the runes and had to sacrifice so much of himself to gain the knowledge of the runes, and he hanged on a tree, I believe, upside down, if memory serves. I could be wrong on that. I'd hate to be wrong on that when I'm supposed to be talking about things I know. And I believe it was for 9 days. Oh, crap. I love when I know stuff when I'm in the car practicing, and the minute I'm in front of a camera, I go, I think this is how it went. Please forgive me if I'm saying that wrong. I'm sure there are people just smacking their heads right now going, really, chick? And we're watching you? I apologize. I'm blanking right now. It's been a day. But when you read that story properly and you get all the facts right, and you take it in just what he sacrificed to gain this knowledge, to gain these tools of divination, and then Freya also helping him understand it and getting through, because I believe she also did assist him with that, at least the understanding and the knowledge of the magic. I believe it was Freya. I want to say in a couple of sources they equate it to Frigga, but I want to say I saw a lecture and she was saying it was Freya. Just a lot of people throughout history will attribute things that Freya had done to Frigga because Frigga is a little easier to handle, which I think is also a good thing to keep in mind also when we're reading about sacred texts, remembering the sources. There are a lot of things that get twisted in history because the author is not the source, if that makes sense. Celtic, I'm going to equate it with Celtic tradition just because I know more about that history, and feel safer talking about that and not screwing it up too terribly much. The Celts were taken over by the Romans. Celts also kind of wandered out so other cultures would affect them, but when we read the histories of the Celts, it's not the Celts writing it down. It's usually the Romans who conquered them. So a lot of things we need to kind of take with a grain of salt because it's not the culture itself that's writing of it. It's usually another culture that has taken them over. The victor is who gets to record the histories of the lands. And for us women, but anyone who worships the goddess, it's a good thing to kind of keep in the back of your mind too, who is writing these histories, because a lot of our goddesses are trivialized and kind of taken down a peg or two. And I can say that without worrying too much about being mistaken, just because I think there's a lot of evidence that our gods' informations have gone missing as well. But you have goddesses like Freya where we don't even know her actual name. You know, Freyr means the Lord, Freya means the lady. Freyr, there are recordings of his actual name. It's not just the title, Freyr. But Freya, all we know is Freya. That's all we got. And she was, it's scary how close we were to losing her as a goddess. So much of her had been bastardized and taken away, and I'm getting into completely different subjects, so I'm going to stop. But my point is, when we are reading things of historical quote-unquote fact, it's good to remember who is recording that fact, both the culture and sometimes the gender. It is a thing. I'm very much one of those people. I'm all for feminism, but at the same time, I love being a woman, but I would not want to be without my counterpart. And I think man is just as amazing as women, or as woman. But I do think historically a lot of information about women have been, especially in this way, have been twisted. Our gods, there are things that are not quite right. And our goddesses, there are things that are definitely not right. And if they are, and for a lot of information, it's just not even there anymore. So, now that I've gone off on that lovely little tangent, sorry. So yeah, these stories connect us to our past. They connect us to our way of doing things now. I mean, there's a lot of traditions that have carried on because of these sacred texts. It's a good thing to kind of keep in mind where they come from, who's had their hand in retelling the story and putting it out there. But the truth is in the writing. We just need to look for it. Okay. And the last thing I kind of wanted to, or not the last thing, sorry, there's another thing after that. Um, as far as the fairy tales in the Greek mythologies, um, fairy tales, I think I use them in my practice so much and do consider them sacred because they teach me so much about archetypes, and it really helps me look through stories and identify characteristics and attributes and qualities, and that helps me so much in my crafting and so much in my magic. um for example, my favorite is Little Red Riding Hood. For those of you that know me, shocker, I like the the fairy tale with the big bad wolf. um but she as a character is so strong. She goes through this huge growth in the story arc. I mean, yes, she's a bit flighty. Yes, she's a bit distracted. Um, I would venture to say a bit selfish, but she shows great strength and she shows great bravery, and it's kind of, her story is very much about, yes, you venture off the path, but you learn more from that. And yes, perils can await you, but only through facing those perils are you able to truly grow. I think it's a huge lesson in shadow work. It's a huge lesson in confronting our fears and our darker selves. And I absolutely adore it. And yeah, it's a children's fairy tale, but it has so much more to offer. Again, it's about deciphering and looking for that deeper meaning and finding the truth for you as you read it. When I read it, I can probably get something very different from what other people get from it. But for me, it is something that is very sacred to me. And then Greek mythology, and I think this works too with the fairy tales, at least the Slavic. It connects me to my childhood. For most of us, when we're children, we believe in magic. It's not a question. It's there. You believe in fairies. You believe in, the moon following you at night. You believe in shooting stars and making wishes. You believe that on Halloween it's a magical time when there are ghosts around every corner. And it, no one can shake that belief. It's only when we get older we start to lose that. And so I think finding things that help us connect to our childhood and connect to that sense of wonder and that sense of mysticism is so important, because without that, I don't know. I don't know. In my practice, I would not be able to connect the way I do if I didn't have a bit of that wonder to connect with. And for me, a way to instantly connect is remembering my Grandma Marie telling me all these fairy tales about Baba Yaga and the Rag Man and the Snow Maiden and all this. It was, and all of those stories, like original Grimm fairy tales type stuff. It is terrifying. I still, when it is late at night, I still kind of look at the clock going, if that Rag Man comes, I am in so much trouble. There are things that I just, I get a little nervous about. And it's because of these tales that she would tell. And I don't even necessarily, some of them, I don't even know if they were ever technically fairy tales or just folk tales that were passed on down within her family. But they took on a whole new life, and they connect me to a part of myself that nothing else can touch. And so that, I think, is the epitome of sacred, when it can get to the core of you in a way that nothing else can. There's something so magical in that, and so sacred. And I think it definitely connects to divinity. As far as the Greek myths, they also connect. I don't work with any Greek deities. I don't work with, in Greek mythology, good folk or fae are kind of the nymphs and the sirens and the mermaids. I don't know if they're mermaids and I don't think there are mermaids in Greek mythology. I think it's just sirens. I'm blanking right now. But those are kind of how I view the fae in the Greek world. And I don't really work with any of those energies. I'm certainly drawn to them, but it's because they connect me to my early stages of my path. My grandma Carol, my mom's mom, was a librarian, and she brought me home a book of Greek myths, and I adored it. I loved it. I inhaled that sucker. Like, it was everything. I lived for it. I loved it. And Greek myths just, it connected to me in a way that nothing else ever had. And I didn't get it. It didn't necessarily, like, Athena, I just, could not get over that woman. She was, she was just insanely cool, and I didn't quite understand why she got so angry at Medusa, because it wasn't her fault. But again, I was like 10 at the time, so I didn't think about the whole, maybe I should look deeper into that and see if there's a hidden meaning, or I wonder who wrote this down. Probably a guy, and he decided to make the two women hate each other, because that seems to be what happens. Anyway, sorry, personal things aside. But that's what it does. The minute someone starts talking about Greek mythology, even though in my practice it's not really a thing per se, it connects me to that moment when I realized my beliefs were different. And even when I did kind of go away from my path and looked at other religions and looked at other spiritual paths, none of them are invalid. All of them are totally in play. But nothing that was the epitome of paganism, and a polytheistic belief structure, and I resonated with that instantly. And those myths and those legends still resonate within me to remind me of that, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense to someone other than me. That's always my hope on these videos, is my rambling for over a half hour makes sense. And the last thing, sorry, the way I took these notes, it's a little interesting. I think this is the last thing. Yes, it is. Okay, we're almost done. Hope it wasn't too painful. The last thing that really these things help me with within my path is grounding. I don't know about anybody else, but me. A lot of times my mundane life overwhelms me. This is an issue. It is a huge flaw. It is a huge fault. I get so caught up in getting to bed by a certain time so I can wake up by a certain time, so I can get Lily where she needs to go by a certain time, so I can get to work by a certain time, so that I can get all my work done. And a lot of times I do not leave work on time. I stay late because I have too much work to do. And then it's getting home and making dinner and having family time, and then maybe eking out a video or an herbal blend. But a lot of times it ends up being but a lot of times by the end of the day, I just want to sit on my couch and watch The Office. I don't want to move. And these stories help me remember this is needed. This is a thing. Especially because it does connect me so much to the ideals of those that came before me. And so many of those ideals were about, hey, you make time for this. This is a thing. This is important. And really, I sat at a desk all day. My ancestors were out farming and tilling and hunting and doing all of this. Seriously, they could still find time to go to their altars and make their offerings and stuff. I think I can make time for this. And it's just good to bring me back. Just kind of like how the connection to childhood is so important. Just connection is so important. And that's what these stories give you. You know, even just looking at my book of myths or legends or the sagas or anything, just looking at my bookcase and going, oh, crap, I should sit down and read a chapter. And then I'll be reading it and, oh, crap, you know, I need to get to my altar. I need to at least light a candle and just mellow out a bit. Or have my, 5 minutes before bed in darkness and just kind of recall my energy and send out those energies I've picked up that aren't mine. And just kind of give myself that cleanse. And I have to admit, there are times those things would be gone. They would be missing if I didn't think about this. If I didn't see that book of Greek myths that my sister Elizabeth Crystal Hawk found at Paganicon a year or so ago. The actual very book that my grandmother checked out from the library when I was 10, she found at Paganicon and bought it for me. And I'm supposed to give it to Lily when she gets older, but that kid rips a page, we're going to have issues. Mama will cry. I cried when she picked it up when she showed me that she had bought it for me. I instantly started tearing up. It meant the world to me, and it still does. And looking at it instantly connects me. It instantly reminds me, crap, I need to get to my altar. Crap, I need to do this. So I think that's extremely important. Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. That's where my notes end, at least. So yeah, those are kind of my thoughts on why on the sacred texts I use, why they're so important to me, what I use them for, how I use them, how I go about them. They really just it's all about seeking. It really is about research and just continuing that education and continuing to find that knowledge and looking for aspects that you didn't necessarily find before, because the stories may stay the same, but we as the reader, we change endlessly. I mean, we're always evolving. We're always getting different ideas and different... We're discovering new things about ourselves every day. So I can sit down with a story I have read a million times over, and suddenly, oh my gosh, I never caught this before. Wow, this totally relates to this, that, and the other thing. And it's because my life experience has brought me to a different stage on my path, so there are new lessons. These stories are ancient, but the lessons are always there, and they're always changing, they're always evolving, because we are always changing and we are always evolving. And that is why sacred texts are so important, and why a video that I took notes on so it wouldn't turn into a 40-minute video is still a 40-minute video. Mother of pearl. So yes, I am sorry that this video has been such a monster. I hope you enjoyed it. If you stuck it out the whole time, thank you. I send you warm fuzzies as always. If you like the video, please like, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff. Otherwise, I will see you guys next time. Yeah, sorry, I'm a bit long-winded tonight. As always, many blessings and blessed be.